fucking thing.
We're live.
Alrighty. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts for tonight. Well, sort of, kind of. Anyways, but maybe I'm being a little bit stooges. Oh, wait. Let's go over to Brandon because this is one of his picks for us. And why don't you tell us what we are going to be watching and why it means something to you?
Yep. As they say, we're watching the film. I would say classic, but it's not really. The 1985 film Stoogemania by where is that darn director? That director Chuck Workman. It keeps advertising Mary J. Blige. Obviously, Mary J. Blige.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, that was but also starring some pretty impressive people. We got Josh Mostel and Sid Caesar, of all people. So, some very funny stuff. And one from the 80s. One I actually was bringing up in reference to, in reference to something special this month, but I'll get on to that a little bit later once we get through first impressions, and I'll add that to mine. But why don't we start with Dave? Was this the first time you have seen Stoogemania?
Yes, it is the first time I have seen Stoogemania. I had actually never heard of it before you told me about it.
Gasp.
Dave,
what happened?
I know the Stooges. I've got every single Stooge film that is here, but this is not the Stooges. So, please, bear with me here.
Okay, I'll give you a break.
It's not for lack of trying.
This is another satire of Stooge films. And to me, I thought it was kind of cheesy. But it was rather likable and definitely seems like it is a film that is something of its time. So it's a little Benny Hillish. So in the end of the film, but it was relatively entertaining for the first time watch. I mean, I can see why it has sentimentality to some people. So.
What about you, Forrest? Was this your first introduction to Stoogemania?
Yeah, I had never heard of this movie until this month, and so I watched it earlier today. Great I will say the cast is. Great cast. Josh Mostel, whom I think this is the first time I've seen Josh Mostel in something that wasn't a supporting role in an Adam Sandler movie. Sid Caesar, Mark Holton, and then so Melanie Shartoff, who plays his girlfriend. I listen to her. I listen to her talk, and all I can hear is Dee Dee Pickles. He voiced Dee Dee Pickles on Rugrats. But I don't know. The whole time I was watching it, I'm like, I felt like, why am I watching a movie about? It's like it's supposed to be an homage to the Three Stooges, but every time they show footage from the Three Stooges, I'm like, I should just watch the Three Stooges instead. Right. I just did not find this movie very engaging.
Understood.
I mean the angle. I mean, I did. Although I think at the beginning when he's talking about being a kid and watching like how he took movies seriously as a kid compared to his peers, that part definitely resonated with me because I kind of felt like that watching movies as a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also like him growing up into like this middle-aged schlub who just all he really does is watch movies. That's I felt on one hand it's like kind of funny, but it's like on one hand like I feel attacked. On the other hand, it still is like I think that could have been a good angle right there. That could have been a good angle right there, is focusing on this guy who's obsessed with movies and has Arrested Development issues.
I do feel like this movie is very much a public service announcement, that may come from like the 1940s and 50s originally, because we used to have a ton of those of drugs and sex and violence and shit like that. Just to tell the audience that this is something that's scary that's on the screen for you. Run out of the theater now.
Right.
And you see like clips of people running from the theaters and shit like that. So
Right.
I just wanted to say I think that is an aspect of this film.
So, what about you, Jake? Is this your first exposure to Stoogemania?
Not my first exposure, no, because I know you've been talking up this film for some time. I've heard about it, but I had never seen it. I really was not a big Three Stooges person growing up. I saw enough to where I was familiar with their shtick, and I got some enjoyment out of it, especially as a kid. But, I was always more into Marx Brothers and Abbott and Costello and, some of that kind of stuff. And
Laurel and Hardy.
I actually never saw them growing up.
Oh, really?
It was, I never did. And I did not see W.C. Fields or some of these other people. But it was mostly
Shame
Marx
on you.
Brothers and Abbott and Costello.
Mhm.
But enough Stooges that I at least knew what they were on about. And strangely enough, I'm very familiar with Josh Mostel, having grown up with Jesus Christ Superstar. But
he did play King Herod there.
Yes. And he got one of the great musical numbers in that one. And of course, he's in City Slickers and a couple other good little roles there. So there was some interesting stuff there, but I was curious about this. I will admit, and Brandon knows because we watched it together, that I was kind of tired when I watched it. So I probably, and it's not a film. I think Dave made this point, or maybe you did, Forrest. I'm sorry, I'm losing track. I'm still kind of tired. That it's not the most engaging film in the world. The scenes I agree, the scenes with the Stooges, for the most part, were more entertaining than the movie itself. But there were a few exceptions. There were a few parts that I found pretty fun. And the reason I've chosen Graham Chapman as my icon right now is that every time the prospective father-in-law spoke, every time he spoke, I heard Graham Chapman saying, "Stop that, it's silly." and so it was kind of like, but overall it was I'm kind of glad I saw it. I wouldn't say it was the most fun movie, but it was interesting, and it was an interesting concept, and we could have done it better. But it does make me want to watch that Stooge collection I got soon, so that I can, get that little bit. It has made me slightly nostalgic for the Stooges, and I think in the end that's probably what they were going for. So,
Right.
yeah.
How about you, Dane? Is this your first time watching Stoogemania?
This was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. I'm not exaggerating, and I've seen some bad movies in my life. This was insufferable, and it was not because I don't like the Three Stooges. Far from it. In fact, I grew up with the Three Stooges. I loved the Three Stooges. I even liked the 2012 movie that the trailers made it look like it would be the worst thing of all time, but actually that movie was a labor of love, albeit kind of awkwardly translated.
There was also
another movie.
There was also another movie with the Three Stooges and Robin Hood that came out way before that.
And
Well,
and also the cover was Snow White.
Well, point being, you look at like a big mainstream studio movie from 2012, that the trailers made it look like it would be the worst movie of all time.
Wasn't
But then-
that a Farrelly Brothers movie?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
and they're big fans of the Three Stooges, and it shows because that really was a labor of love. Granted, it had the Jersey Shore people, and it had like the whole, softening of the physical violence at the very end and all that. It had a lot of that stupid 21st century stuff that they have to put in there, but it could have been so much worse. Like this.
No one
film was.
has to put in the Jersey Shore people.
They don't. But my point is, that movie could have been the worst thing of all time.
Right.
And it shockingly was not. If anything, it was pretty loving and reverential for the most part. Unlike this film, which this was insufferable because now it's not that it's not made by people that don't like the Three Stooges. It's that this is one of the laziest movies I have ever seen because it is mostly just Three Stooges clips, not even full episodes back to back, but clips that are out of sequence. And of course, I knew that they were going to do this because this is obviously a low budget movie. And again, I'm not dismissing it just because it's that, but because this is a low budget movie, they are taking all of their clips from the Three Stooges shorts: Malice in the Palace, Disorder in the Court, Sing a Song of Sixpence, and Brideless Groom, all of which are in the public domain, and it's the same ones that everybody uses. Like Pulp Fiction, they played Brideless Groom, and that movie had money, and so they didn't have to use that one. They just happened to do it. But it's like, this was one of the laziest movies, if not the laziest movie I have ever seen in my life. I
commented to Brandon while we were watching it that it was interesting that all the clips used Shemp instead of Curly. Because
Curly demands the money.
I
never saw Shemp growing up. I saw Curly.
It threw me off.
Yeah.
They already had a Curly lookalike in the film. I guess that's what they thought about.
The reason why is because Shemp was in 3 out of the 4 of the public ones.
Right.
And this might be a bit heretical to say because I am a big Three Stooges fan, but I did like Shemp more than Curly.
I prefer Shemp, yeah.
Me too. Well, because I think Shemp had more nuance to him, and he could play.
He has the best one-liners, I think.
He could play different emotions, whereas Curly couldn't be kind of one note. Although his one note was very endearing, but there was just a little bit more to Shemp. But that's
he has one of his best lines ever in one of the clips in this, where the cop's about to arrest him, and he's like, "Please don't arrest me, sir. I got 6 wives and 2 children at home."
Yeah, well,
like, that's just so classic.
Wait, he has 6 wives and only 2 kids.
And
He's slacking.
And then you've got Marx Brothers going, "I resent that remark."
My point in saying all of this is that I was stunned that they actually made this into a movie that human beings in the 80s paid for with money to see in the theater.
I don't know how many did.
Just wait till we do Titanic: The Legend Goes On.
But hey, I mean that
it was probably one of those safe films they played at the drive-through, like in between shows or some shit.
Well, but that's actually kind of where I was going with this, because quite frankly, this movie came across like, you know how this is a bad example, but you know, like Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs, like a show like that with like skits and bits that are in between the commercials and before the movie even starts playing again. And that's a bad example because that's when it's done well. But like I've seen other cable shows that have like a host or a sketch or something that frames the bits before commercials start or after they've ended or whatever. This felt like if you took all of those segments of like if they were showing like a Three Stooges marathon on cable, which they would do that. Like USA played a ton of them. in the 90s when I was growing up. That's how I watched a lot of them. It'd be like if you stitched together some of the worst, like cringiest, awful sketches that are trying to emulate the Three Stooges and doing it horribly. On like a cable network, you took all of those segments, you stitched them together with Three Stooges clips that are out of sequence that all came from the same public domain ones, and you tried to release that as a movie. And I was like, as much as people hate something like Freddy Got Fingered as far as comedies go, as much as people hate that,
I love it.
But that's what I mean. It's like, if there's one thing that you can say about the movie, whether you like it or hate it, it is not lazy. It is what it is, and it goes for it 200%. And it's committed to its vision. This was this redefined lazy. I was truly shocked by this movie. Truly shocked by it.
I was expecting a commercial advertisement somewhere in between or some shit.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it felt like those interstitial sketch segments that you'd see on cable back in the day. Stitch all those together, throw in some clips that are out of context, and some, I guess, wacky video effects to try to integrate them into the movie. And you pass that off as a fucking movie, and then they use the colorized footage to add insult to injury. And oh my god, this was, I'm like seriously stunned. Now the only person I kind of sort of liked in this was Sid Caesar.
Of course.
Every time he was on screen, I think he's the only one that carried the film.
Doctor Fix Your Minder.
Yeah, even then it was like he was trying to play Mel Brooks playing Dracula.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
And I'll
bet you afterwards he was probably thinking, and to think I shaved my mustache for that film.
Yeah.
or Leslie Nielsen as Dracula, dead and loving it.
Well, more so Mel Brooks because he had the voice and he had the mannerisms.
Right.
It's just like, I was flabbergasted by this movie, and that is not an easy thing to do to me, because again, I have seen Freddy Got Fingered multiple times. I have seen a lot of bad movies, like notoriously bad movies, multiple times. I've seen movies that are atrocious on one level or another. And I've seen movies that like outrage people and don't really affect me much, or I might even like them or have a weird sort of appreciation for them. This was like, I was shocked at this film.
I feel like this is something that the angry video game nerd could go through. He could go through his movie collection, like his VHS collection, and just shit all over this.
I was going all angry nerd on this thing in my head, because like this would have been prime either like classic Nostalgia Critic or classic AVGN or or other reviewers of that era. This would have been prime for that kind of thing, because I could hear the review going on in my head during the thing, because I was like,
what a shitload of fuck.
Well, yeah, what a shitload of fuck. What were they thinking? I'd rather watch the 2012 movie. Like I can hear the lines in my head right now. Or like, but okay. So the worst part of the movie by far is the fact that not just the usage of the clips and all that, but so they use these clips. They're out of sequence. They're out of their original context and stuff. And the fact of the matter is, the clips that they use, albeit from the public domain shorts, but they're still good. And the thing is, like, they are good shorts. They're great shorts. They're some of the most classic comedians of their era. And it's like, why the fuck am I watching these other people who are just not funny or charming at all, Why am I watching this shit that I don't care about when I could be watching the actual Three Stooges shorts? Like that was the most infuriating thing about it, was that it's not like there's not good stuff in this movie. It was just all pre-existing stuff that they cut and pasted, and it's like, I should just be watching the Three Stooges. Why the fuck am I watching this shit? Why am I watching these people that, oh my god.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to Mo. Was this your first time, Mo, watching this film?
I'm sorry for ranting there, but my god. You guys know me. I'm not normally like this.
There is a method to my madness.
This movie just brought it out in me. Holy shit, but go on.
Mo?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it might have been me.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know, man. I would disagree with most of that, respectively. I'm not saying this movie's great, but I fucking loved it, man. And I'm not coming at this as like, huge. I wouldn't consider myself a huge fan of the Stooges. Definitely like a seasoned viewer of it, though, over the years, I would say. And I mean, it's not just because it's Brandon's choice either. I just genuinely liked how absurd the movie was. And most of the things you said about it that I would agree with, are also just what I consider the good qualities of the movie. I liked how it was like some batshit drug trip, that happened to intersperse Stooge clips in there. And while they might not have showcased the best parts of any of those particular things, and they were definitely out of sequence and stuff for sure, I think in the context of the story in the movie, they did a good job of working them in there, and the fact that they were kind of disjointed and all over the place added to that whole idea of this dude going insane. This weird fever that was overtaking these people. I don't know, I love stupid shit like that, though.
Well, it's not
genuinely
meant to
I do love it.
It's not meant to take it away from anybody that does enjoy it. I just was
I feel you.
Oh yeah,
this is something they easily could have chopped into like 8 segments and played them in little snippets on Adult Swim, like back when they first added that morning block where they'd play like old Popeye episodes and stuff. And it worked perfect in the context of that. Nobody in it is particularly great other than the chick's dad and the doctor dude.
I could even
see hysterical.
I could even see Svengoolie using bits and pieces of this during his show. So,
but again, that's my point though with the whole thing. Is like, this didn't feel like a movie. This felt like something you'd see on cable that you just happen to compile and kind of sort of stitch it together into a movie.
And that's what makes it awesome to me. It feels like the type of thing that, had I seen this growing up, I would have watched it and been like, my fuck, that is spectacular. And then I just would have kept showing it to people just to see their reactions to it, and the killer sample in there too, where they slow down. I forget who says it, but he's like, I'm a victim of circumstance, and then it like slows it down and they play it back real slow, where he's like, I'm a victim of circumstance, and then it goes like, like I gotta use that sample in something eventually. That needs like crushing industrial guitar riffs to kick in like right after he says it, and then.
Well, funny you should say that, because one of the 4 Three Stooges public domain shorts that are out there, Disorder in the Court, which is the one with Curly, the part where the judge says, "Gentlemen, you must control your killing instincts," that was used as a sample in a White Zombie song.
Yeah, there's a couple of other bits in there too that sounded prime for that, and I think that was one of them, and that's probably why, because I'm sure I've probably heard it at some point. But man, I mean, it's just how it sounds so creepy, like slowed down like that.
Yeah, well, but I mean, so in the movie's defense, you can't say that they don't make use of public domain materials that exist, because
of course
I say that because public domain materials are a boon for the independent, low-budget filmmaker. And I'm not saying don't use them, because that they can be done very well. It's just that when that's all you've got, more or less, then the seams show in the story, and the fact that this used the public domain resources so much, like I have never seen a movie that did it like
I mean,
that.
to be fair though, considering the time that it was made, which I think is getting an element being removed from the conversation a little bit. I doubt there was anybody else who'd even ever conceived of making any type of Three Stooges movie other than the fucking Three Stooges, really. This is definitely like just a weird ass fan sort of tribute film.
Well,
to,
the 80s is all over this stuff.
Well, in all fairness as well, this was made. So the Stooges have gone through a couple of different phases of popularity. So they had their initial popularity in the 30s and 40s, a little bit of kind of a tiny resurgence in like the 60s because of their original shorts having circulated in some Saturday matinees and especially on television. So that was kind of the second wave. And I guess the third wave was in the 80s when the shorts were shown again on television. And I, even as a kid, I remembered seeing them played on USA in a big marathon in like the late 80s or the late 90s and early 2000s. So they've definitely had waves.
Holy shit, they got an NES game back then,
Which I played that game. It sucked. But I
Ghostbusters 2.
But I played that game when I was growing up. And I mean, then I guess you could call the 2012 movie, which I don't think was like a massive hit, but it didn't bomb. But you could call that like a fourth wave of at least awareness. So I mean, they've gone through.
Yeah, they've had their peaks and valleys for sure, and this probably came like just time. I mean, if this had been timed right during that surge in popularity in the 80s and had been shopped to the right people, maybe it'd have been something totally different. I like how it kind of feels like a less sleazy trauma movie without the violence. Like that's basically, and they even put some sleaziness in there. The Triple Stooge.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna be saying that for a while, dude.
If this had been a trauma movie, then I might have been able to accept, what was going on in between the clips and stuff, because then. If that had been Lloyd running around doing crazy shit, then that would have given me something.
More familiar.
I could have seen Lloyd as the Doctor. I could have
totally seen him.
Well, again, he has a Brooksian quality to him.
Yeah, he basically is like a dollar store Mel Brooks,
Sid Caesar was in History of the World Part 1. So
yeah, he was. Yes. Well, I call Lloyd Kaufman. I call him his humor anyway. I say that it's like Mel Brooks on acid.
That too. I mean, and it's
LSD.
This has that very trauma quality to it in terms of that stuff, and it's just a fun, like, goofy fucking movie. I don't think even Brandon, as a kid, probably thought it was a masterpiece or anything.
Oh no,
I hope not.
I didn't really get a trauma vibe from it because if it was a trauma thing, then it would have been far crazier and more extreme, and
it's pretty fucking insane when you really get into it and you're not just bummed that you're not watching Three Stooges movies. Like there's some crazy shit in this.
It's just
not that crazy. Well, it's not
considering the context. It's pretty fucking wild.
Well, it's not coherent, but it's not like. I don't know. When I think of
Stooge Row, that whole bit is just like.
I love this.
They took this next level even beyond what I thought they would do in this shit. Like that's. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we still have two more. Myself and Roger. Was this your first time watching Stoogemania?
Roger-san.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just like 99% of the other stuff you showed me so far. This is completely new. I'd never have watched the show without your help. My initial reaction was, believe it or not, Pete's Dragon and Forrest Gump.
Wow, that's a cool.
You have a guy that's running through his life. He's living his life, and he's seen stuff that's not really there. Right? So there's old stuff, there's new stuff. I wasn't really, I was never a fan of the slapstick stuff. I mean, I've seen the matinee shows, but I was a kid that had the reruns on TV with the Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges and the Honeymooners and other kind of stuff. but I never did get involved. Even there was a cartoon with the Three Stooges as well. I had more fun watching the cartoon than I did watching the black and whites. But must admit, I was never a big fan of this kind of type of show. But I did resonate with the main character because I remember he was saying that he was picked on a lot as a kid, but he was really serious about movies. I could assimilate myself with that kind of a person. And I didn't think it was a movie that I would actually buy or rent, but it was what it is. It just was a kind of like an expose of a person that went through the beginning of the movie to the middle of the movie to the end of the movie.
He was a character through the entire movie. Yeah.
So it was not your Gina Cyber live action.
No, Gina Cyber was a complete fiction of hell, and I absolutely hated it. Just because it was no. I like Fist of North Star, so I'm not not immune to this gore and anime. But it was just a pointless film. It's just for the point of the Gina Cyber to see how much violence you can pack in for every single second of the show. So I had very little endearment. While this show had, some charm to it, I mean, like I said, I agree with Dane that this will never become anything other than a niche film that certain people will watch and other parts of the world will forget about. But it was a harmless movie, that had some.
Yeah, it really was low on the gore quotient. They should have put some of that in there.
But I did have a certain amount of fun watching it. It was all right. It was all right. I didn't have any problems getting through the film. I just simply wouldn't have bought it.
You know what's a better Three Stooges movie than this is Evil Dead 2. I'm serious because Sam Raimi takes a lot of influence from the Three Stooges, and a lot of gags in Evil Dead 2 and in Army of Darkness derive very heavily from the Three Stooges, to the point where they use fake shimps for the stunts and stuff. They call them that, and they have the eye poke, they have all that stuff, and you talk about the gore quotient, it is way up there. But it's like, that's a better Three Stooges movie than this.
See, I don't think this was trying to be a Three Stooges movie. I think it was trying to be a movie about an obsessed dude in a certain fandom, and they happen to be like Stooge nerds.
It's just a whimsical film. This was meant to just be watched. Not everything has to have a EMC, MC squared kind of connotation to the film. It's just a movie to watch. Some things are like that. It doesn't have to have a grand message.
Throw on so the real movie can come on.
Yeah. Sometimes your brain has to take a break.
Yep.
I think my brain took such a break that I don't have any left.
This was the intermission, folks. So,
well, why don't I go ahead and I'll go on why I submitted this.
Please.
So my first introduction to this, it's actually tied to my father, who exposed me to quite a few things in my life, for better or for worse. And this is one of those. My father was a huge Three Stooges fan. I was more of a Marx Brothers fan myself. I thought that there was more intellectual at the time, and I've gotten a little bit. I gained more appreciation of the Stooges as time has gone on. But there was some surreal quality of it that I remember as a child watching this in 1986 or 87. That I just kept sticking in my mind. So I wanted to, let's see, there we go. I wanted to find this later on, this movie that my father introduced me to. And I kept looking for it, and eventually I found a VHS tape of it. And I was like, awesome, I can see this again. I also found it on YouTube, and I was like, ooh, I can watch it. But then I took it. Then I took the VHS tape to my father and said, "We're going to discuss this sometime." And he's like, "That would be cool. I really want to see it myself again. It's been so long." And I left it with him. And I remember that. And he'd even said to me that he would that if I put it up there, he'd watch the show. He hadn't really watched it. He didn't even know exactly what we do or discuss or how we go about it. But I remember talking to him about it. Matter of fact, a few weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago, maybe. It's been a while now. And he had been looking forward to it. Matter of fact, I remembered finally where I put my tape. I had left it with him. But also Mo had introduced me to a person that had transferred those type of things to DVD, which was great.
VHSPS.com. Check it out. And
Very
get
good.
my copy of Stoogemania from there so I could subject all type of other people to this glorious shit.
I was surprised that he had it, but it was cool that he did. And so I was like, this is Providence. So I went ahead and I had submitted it. It wasn't that I loved the film. I didn't hate the film. I just thought it was a fun 80s style comedy with some with a little bit of an ode to the Three Stooges. And of course, unfortunately, my father could not listen to this. He passed about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. Well, a week after I talked with him about it. So, it is a sad thing that he could not watch this or listen to this. Maybe in some form, I guess he may. But this is not about a particular love of the film or a particular dislike of the film for me. It's more about that feeling that came from seeing it and the nostalgia related to it, as well as the relationship that I had with my father in relation to the film. So that's really what it's all about. So hopefully that can show why I submitted this film.
It is kind of like the perfect movie. It's like, you just watch like some goofy, stupid movie with your dad and laugh at it. I do that with my kid all the time. I like to think there's plenty of movies I've shown her where she's like, I don't love that, but I'm going to remember it fondly.
And, Jacob was talking about how we watched the film, but I felt like it was a good send-off. We did our memorial service, and we sat there afterwards with one of his favorite apricot brandies and just sat there and watched it in the room that he would have watched it in. So it is
poke each other in the eyes, give each other a couple of tummy bumps or something.
So,
he'd have liked that, I'm sure.
One thing to say, I guess it's kind of the Ratatouille Anton ego monologue, is the idea that something that's so seemingly, small and insignificant or, laughable or whatever, not worthy of praise or whatever, that something like that can still carry a lot of weight for certain people and can be greater than the sum of its parts. And obviously it's a very kind of subjective thing on that front. But what you're saying there, it's like, it may not be anything overly great in and of itself, but the association that you have with it is what carries you through. And if anything, any film, regardless of its objective merits, any film has the potential to do that. And so I mean, that's what is kind of interesting about the medium of art and art in general. That it's partially it's the skill set of the artist according to what does or doesn't make for an effective piece of art within that particular medium. But then even more than that, it's how does one personally connect to it. And for a lot of people, if enough people feel a certain way about something, and that can kind of help to guide the perception of the work. So, and even if no one agrees with you, if it has a personal connection to you, I mean, that is what can carry you through. I'm trying to think if I have anything like that kind of has that because that's like a very specific connection point. Admittedly.
Yes, it is.
Well, I think go ahead, Brandon.
But again, I am glad to see that there are people who liked it and who really didn't like it, because it brings about interesting discussion. I'm in the middle.
Mhm.
I thought it was okay, and there are moments of it that I really like. And
see, I probably like the movie more than you, dude. Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, it's something I want to watch again. I'm gonna buy it. I think there's just something fascinating about something so weird to me, you know, and it really was a weird film, you know.
Well, let's dive in.
Let's.
So we've got our friend, our lovely protagonist, Howard F. Howard, a child of the movies himself, someone who loved the Three Stooges. When apparently he would watch it in theaters full of rabid children.
Right.
That kid's just pissing in the seat. I fucking. Oh man.
And for those who don't know, so Howard F. Howard there is named after Howard Fine and Howard, and of course that none of those were their real names, but it was, you know, Mo Howard was Moses Horowitz. Larry Fine was Louis Feinberg, and then you had they reference Shemp more than this, but that was Sam Horowitz, and then of course Curly's real name was Jerome Horowitz, but that's what they're referencing there. And of course there's the famous line from a short that is definitely not in the public domain, but it's the one where they're dizzy doctors, one of their best, but it was the famous calling Dr. Howard, Dr. Fine, Dr. Howard, so that's where that comes from. And
of course he grows up as kind of this not so well-to-do individual, man with his head in the clouds, more in more ways than one, with a obvious deteriorating delusional disorder, where he tends to carry his stooges with him as he goes, even managing to produce an amount of popcorn.
Always let your conscience be your guide.
Even real genius would blush at the amount of popcorn he could get.
Right.
Yeah, dude. It was quite the batch. I don't know. That whole intro, I just fucking love. Like, the movie had me from the moment it started, because just the chaos of that movie theater is beautiful, and I love everything about it. The kid pissing on the seat is like obviously the main thing that draws your attention, and all the popcorn getting wasted, which is just, foreshadowing of what's to come.
Right.
But the best element of it that's just so subtly shitty and hilarious is that all the worst kids are wearing headbands, and that was totally an 80s thing, right? Like, if you were wearing a headband, you were probably a bad dude, I could not stop laughing already, like 2 minutes into it,
Oh, I love the opening. I think the way the opening came across was really good. It introduced the character. I do feel like it's
style narration on it,
I do feel like
it's one of the stronger points.
They missed an opportunity, I think, to go better with the characterization on it further. But I do think that it was a very strong opening. I think even you said, even you, Dane, I think you said, no, it wasn't you, Dane. It was Forrest that said that you had some connection to the opening.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
as far as being a young movie buff.
Right. If any kids were behaving like that in our theater, some scary dude with a fucking mag light would have put a stop to that. Like, really quick,
so. I don't know what kind of theater that was.
That's what I would go to.
Peep show.
Yeah.
So he's also trying to work with, of course, Beverly, which he's going to marry, and they're going to meet with his father. It was soon to be father-in-law in the in the future. So he's got to be ready for that. So he gets himself ready after watching the Three Stooges on his giant pile of popcorn, which I'll admit, if I had done that for some reason, I would probably want to do the same.
Like, why clean it up right now? Plenty of this is fresh, hasn't touched carpet yet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, shoot, you got layers between that and the carpet. Might as well enjoy it. But,
there's I love too, because isn't that where they introduced the idea pretty much right out of the gate of the Stoogemania, and that
the commercial
in between. I just so love that part too. That dude's just like going all stooge, and he just starts beating his family and like fucking trashing his house.
Right.
And he ends up being like the spokesperson for it later on. As the guy got cured. It's but he goes to this dry cleaner, which again, everything does a good. obviously the people who did this did love the material because a lot of it was callback to Stooge jokes, Stooge bits, including that particular dry cleaning owner with him messing up the name. And then, of course, at the end when he's being fired for screwing up, the dry cleaner, of course, corrects him, and when he gets the name right, and provides the false name instead.
Mhm.
Dude, he takes that epic tumble out the door and just lays there like he. I feel like they had to have made him do it at least once or twice because as a fat kid myself, I could relate with how he's just laying there, like just totally fatting on the ground. Like, yes, I got it. I did the role. Now we could do the take, and I could just lay here for the rest of it. It's fucking awesome, man.
You were saying something, Roger?
Yeah, I was
Sorry about that,
very
dude.
concerning that the main character's girlfriend or fiance, she was completely oblivious. If she
Well,
seemed
you
like
notice-
Yeah.
Kind of cute, you know.
It's just like the information she saw was reinterpreted in something that she wanted to see.
Did you notice that they were talking
Yeah.
about like this is like the 10th time or something that she's brought somebody?
Yeah.
The only guy
And they were
who
all
made her happy.
really.
I think he
They were-
says like 30 something. Actually, it's more than 10. You know, they were all
Something like that.
silly.
And of course, whenever you bring the boyfriend friend to the parents, it's always the earring that fucks with the father's mind, you know.
The father had like a George C. Patton, kind of look.
Although, as Brandon pointed out when we were watching, he was like, for someone who's so concerned about stuff being silly, they picked a strange restaurant to
they
have the meeting at.
Belly dancers and shit.
Belly dancers.
Yeah.
I mean, see, that's another great shining example of like the logic of this movie that I just love, where the dude passes out because we kind of skipped over the doctor, which is like one of the best.
We'll get
parts
back to that guy
for sure. He deserves a section of his own, but he's taking these sleeping pills and he like passes out on the pasta. And the dude's whole logic is like, this guy wanted to go to sleep and he did it. He knows what he wants. He's not silly.
It is just like.
Yeah.
And he does it because he sees this illness that he's got and he wants to do better because he's deep down, this guy is supposed to be a good guy and he wants to do right by it. So he goes to this doctor, Sid Caesar, and of course he's seeing Three Stooges stuff just pop up everywhere, like opening the doors and stuff like that. But and apparently his dreams, they're very inexpensive. They didn't have a lot of money for his dreams because it's always that open sort of thing. But
those public domain fucking REM cycles, you know what I mean?
But it's like in that the Beck thing where he only dreams in 3D. This guy only dreams in public domain. But
Yeah.
But Sid Caesar, I thought, was probably one of the most entertaining pieces of this entire thing.
He's just empowering that nurse's assistant, like.
And then the thing where he gives him the pills, he gives him the wrong pills first off, and then he's like, 12 of these every hour. And then he leaves like, what if, or maybe it was one every 12 hours, or...
Do you read the instructions on these? I love it.
Oh, so he was a really fun guy, and he makes a reappearance, I think, in the Stooge treatment.
Stoogetarian. Was it Stooge Hill?
Yep. And this guy, he impresses the family, but he ends up continuing to fail out on things. They go to marry at the Justice of Peace. And they have this sequence that, in my opinion, is one of the cooler sequences out there. Is that they
right over the opportunity to say "stooge out" right there? Huh? I see.
Oh, I thought they did an excellent thing. They did. They stooged out by really splicing together the scenes from the movie and the scenes from the other Justice of the Peace scene.
Yeah, that's a crazy bit, dude. Maybe it was the weed, but there was several moments where I forgot which one I was watching. I was like, wait a minute. Is this the Stooge short or is this the actual footage?
And that's, I think, why they chose to show the colorized version, Dane, was to have that confusion.
Yeah, I know that that's what they were doing, but it's like, and I also know, context wise, I know that the '80s was the era where classics were being colorized, as blasphemous as that was. But I know that it was a thing at the time, and people were kind of seeing if, would people like that? Would they like these classics if they were in color and stuff? So partially that is of the period, but and I know that they were trying to create that blurring of reality and stuff. But I was like, I have seen other independent distributors that tend to distribute public domain things. The way that they get around that is that they will do stuff like that. They will colorize things, or they will, like there's an actual Blu-ray release of those 4 public domain shorts in 3D for no reason
What?
other. I'm not even joking. In 3D for no other reason
That
that
might be
that
weirder than that this movie exists.
well,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is like, and that's its own form of laziness in a weird way. But the idea is that that company, I can't remember what it is, but they did them in 3D, and I'm sure it's probably horrible 3D, just so that they could claim
Oh,
that
guarantee it.
just so that they could claim that version of it as their
Theirs.
own, as like a new copyright. Yeah.
I get it. I feel like I've seen things like that before with like Grindhouse movies too.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, and that's kind of partially where I'm coming from with this stuff is
No.
I've seen things like that just because you can make one teeny alteration, and this had quite a few more than just that, but like you do that and you slap a new copyright on that and you're able to make something new out of it, which is fine if you put in some work and effort and really use public domain properties to make something that is truly unique and different. And because like nobody is complaining that Wicked, the book or the musical or whatever, nobody is complaining that that is using The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which is in the public domain now. Nobody's complaining that that is using a public domain work to make something new, because it does that. It uses something and makes something totally original and with real effort put into it. This was lazy, and it's up there with
I don't
stuff
know
like that.
no,
Is it a movie that you should be really judging on, like, necessarily? I mean, I suppose any movie's worth looking at through that lens, but I don't know. I very much from the get-go knew that like it was going for some type of schlocky low budget thing, so it was not surprising to me the way it was handled.
And I'm not dismissing it because it's schlocky and low budget, because again, I have to say you could do a movie like this and make it like a loving homage, which is not to say that this wasn't. It just was done badly, and it was done mostly by recycling that which was already good to begin with, as opposed to like if they'd have used fewer clips, or maybe not in quite as long of stretches, and if the stuff in between had been better written, or more batshit, or more this and that, then it might have possibly been more, I guess you'd say, transformative, if we want to use fair use language, which doesn't really apply here because it's public domain. But it would have you would have had more to work with here.
Well, does anybody else have any thoughts about the doctor scene, or this particular scene that they had with the Justice of the Peace?
I really like how he's like telling him to kick the shit out of himself, if it starts to flare up, and then he ends up on the floor and he's just like, screw it, and he goes back to like mowing down on that nurse lady, and then the guy wakes up and he's like, all right, yeah, let's
I mean, the Sid Caesar part, that was probably the closest that it got to being funny or to being its own thing. That was the closest, because Sid Caesar is a veteran of I don't know if you'd say that era, or maybe the era, like just after that. But it's like it's close enough to where there's some overlap, and he clearly gets like a vaudeville style of delivery and stuff. So that's like the
It felt
closest it
closer
gets
to being a
being
normal
funny.
movie, you know. So
Yeah,
how about
well, and closer to making it its own thing. But then you mentioned the slapping himself and hitting himself and stuff. But like, so you notice they do the punch in the stomach, they do the eye poke, they do the slapping and stuff, and you can tell that this is being done by people that's not their standard mode of comedy, because they're pulling their punches, they're pulling their slaps.
oh
all
yeah,
that
because when you
stuff.
see the Stooges shit, they were going fucking stiff on each other a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
they
you know?
did it. They did it for real. And keep in mind, this was before the era of stuntmen, really, in the way that we think of it
Yeah.
today. That
They
was
might be
before.
some of the earlier examples of like proper ones, because dude, there's several scenes in those shorts where like the dude gets owned off that chair in that courtroom scene, and that's
Yeah.
for real
Well,
dangerous.
but
Like he
that's
falls
well,
against the
Yeah.
stairs and stuff.
well,
well, partially why there are some of those cringier moments in the 2012 film, which again I have to say is a more successful labor of love that is also flawed. But part of the cringier elements of it are due to the fact that back in the 30s, like I said, there were no real stuntmen or whatever, so the only way to do it was pretty much to do it for real.
Yeah, those guys
And
were
it-
sending it.
And it was to the point where apparently Larry, his cheek, one of his cheeks, the one that would more frequently be slapped by Mo, it had gotten slapped by Mo so often and slapped for real that it was like as calloused as like the bottom of his foot. Like it's so that's what I'm saying is like those guys did it for real, and they committed fully, and you can see the results on the screen because
Yeah, and
nobody
then it
but
well,
juxtaposed with the softer. That's fair
exactly.
criticism.
Well, and
So-
nobody could do that kind of slapstick like they could, and they did it for real. That's why it sold it so well, because they did it for real. There was no way to fake it, and that was one of those things you couldn't really reproduce even now, even in something that was more loving and more of a success like the 2012 film. Even then, they couldn't quite get it there, even though they got closer.
Anybody else have any thoughts about those two scenes? Just as far as in their reference to the film, I consider those two probably the more iconic ones, other than the first part of the film, just because one, the doctor scene, Sid Caesar, just excellent, but the other one, I thought the interposing with that and the real footage, they did a very good job of what they did.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
the quick cuts and everything like that. Like it really comes together nicely.
You're saying something, Dave?
I was saying that I thought that they did that juxtaposition really well with the doctor. I think the doctor was what kind of sold the film.
Well, why don't we move on to Stooge Row, because he flees and he's like, well, screw it.
Yes.
I'm just gonna go to Stooge Row because everybody's a Stooge there. And they make this whole Stoogemania thing like it's just something that happens,
It's
fairly
spread
common
like a
occurrence.
plague and then become like it's almost like a little leper colony down there. I especially like that part where that hooker propositions him in Stooge speak. That's one of the best things I've ever seen. Oh my god.
That's gotta be the trippiest part. You're saying something, Roger?
Yeah, it's absolutely. It was the strangest part of the whole film. Yeah, just like it was basically the main character's. I think with the main character's dream come true. He saw everything that he always wanted to see.
But it also kind of was a dark juxtaposition as well, because it showed his real addiction, or him
Right.
giving way to his addiction, especially when you go into the place with the Nickelodeon there, where he's doing that, which, by the way, is the one thing I had remembered from when I watched it originally as a child, was him doing the putting like the stuff in the Nickelodeon and discontinuing, or as what was it? Well, you said Triple Stooge.
Yeah, that whole seedy fucking like peep show Stooge club that he went to was so amazing, dude.
Weird
It's-
arcade game.
That's just such a was it Stooge's Lair or whatever? It's supposed to be like
Yeah.
Dragon's Lair. That's where that awesome sample I was talking about comes from. It's just everything about that is so fucking stupid, but I love every single moment of it. When he's out there watching Stooges with all like those Stooge lookalike guys on the TV and stuff, and I think that's the part where they have that other PSA, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, that the whole bit with the video game-esque aesthetic there, which again they're still using the public domain footage, but that whole thing, I was again my AVGN voice kicked into my head, and I was like, I'd rather play the NES game than watch this shit, you know.
It was a pretty accurate representation of the type of maybe gameplay that would be going on in a Dragon Slayer type game, though.
Yeah.
It's like quick time event shit.
That one I can give them credit at least for thinking outside the box with their usage of the public domain footage, just because it was noticeably different from the rest. But like, it did make me want to. It did make me say to myself that I'd rather be playing the NES game, which sucked also.
I like that game, but yeah, it's one of those games that sort of like, a series of shorts. You got to play it like a variety game, and none of them play particularly good. That was a symptom of variety games of the time, unfortunately.
It was, although the fake out there with the Ghostbusters 2 bit and with the actually very well sampled voices for an NES cartridge, like that whole thing was very funny.
It's cool. I mean, a lot of those AVGN reviews are partially accurate, but then partially also kind of like a parody of ultra critical game reviewers. There's several of those games that he's trashed on that are actually pretty great, like when you learn how to play them. Kid Cool is a good example, or like Jaws, or Nightmare on Elm Street, any of those. But yeah,
I used to love Simon's Quest when I was a child. I used to love that game.
I still take issue with that because it's got that Nintendo Power garbage with crouching in the corner or whatever. But yeah, it's just everything about that Stooge Club was brilliant to me. Even with the mallet behind the glass next to the triple Stooge.
Oh, I love that because he's like, and it goes like slow and backward, and it was just it was the trippiest. That was a very trippy segment throughout that entire time.
I mean, at least the Stooge impersonators that they got kind of in the latter half. I mean, there were a few that were like halfway decent. They weren't as good as the ones in the 2012 film. Who they also were not perfect. Like the guy who played Curly was probably the weakest out of them, but they clearly studied their characters, and they did a better job than I think a lot of people could have done. And in here, the Stooge impersonators they got, they were some of the better people there, just because again they seemed to study their characters, and and there's an art to that. So they were some of the better people there. But again, I've seen better Stooge impersonators, but.
Did you notice that a Marx brother ended up slipping in there?
Yeah. I think I did notice that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a Harpo for some reason.
He was bundled up with the Stooges and sent to one of the worst psychiatric treatment centers out there. Well, at least everybody got their own complimentary robe. But
you know what? For some reason, that director of the facility or whatever that they had on the VHS, for some reason, I thought they said L. Ron Hubbard.
Well,
they were making fun of that.
Well, that whole thing was that whole thing with L. Ron Howard. That whole thing was like, okay, that's like closer to being funny because it's a mashup of L. Ron Hubbard and Ron Howard, who was known as an actor at the time more so than a director. But it, that guy was like, okay, well, that's closer to being funny. But again, it's like once they get to this mental ward or whatever, I was like, yeah, this movie belongs in a mental ward, and you know that this place is really unscrupulous and awful because Victoria Jackson's working there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It was just to me, of course, obviously treatment methods, of course they're not going to work. They're terrible treatment methods.
Yeah.
Many of them are actually reinforcing their stooge-like behavior instead of causing it to get better.
I like that part where they first intake them and that guy's like, give them their fix. So I like it when they squirm when you turn it off. Like that.
Yeah.
What a dick. The sad part is I'm sure there's people that do stuff like that in recovery facilities, man, you know, because there's all types of terrible humans out there. But at the time I laughed at it real hard.
But of course the treatment doesn't work. You get to the end and they play the Three Stooges where everyone's like, see, they don't laugh, but eventually they all do, and they all just say screw it and they go wild. And he gets married, and I'm not even sure what the point of the film was at the end, because it just kind of ended there, but still.
I take it very much. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say we get the whole moment where like his significant other is like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to be as bonkers as you.
But you know they were going to use the cream pies when they sang it too.
I think the overall message of the movie is that sometimes things are just allowed to be stupid. You know what I mean? If they make you happy, so be it.
I think you're just. There are all kinds of different people, and exactly what is a normal, you know.
Well, that too, and I mean, it's like at the end of the day, the Three Stooges are pretty fucking stupid. You know, as fun as it is, like the point of it is to be silly and dumb. You know,
well, I would slightly disagree with that, just because I think that there's an art to what they did that other people can't recreate. Not just in terms of the slapstick.
They have their own thing for sure, but I mean,
listen. So it's not just the slapstick, which I think that in terms of live action, so we're not counting animation, but I think you would be hard pressed to find better live action slapstick than what they did, and they really got it down to perfection. But it wasn't just that. If you actually watch a lot of the classic shorts, they had some really clever writing, great dialogue, and
honestly, that's always been my opinion. That shit's funnier than the slapstick. Just like I prefer Shemp.
I agree, actually, but what's funny about that though is that the Three Stooges actually did not write any of their own material, and they didn't even come up with their own characters. They were comedians that were hired by Ted Healy, and Ted Healy came up with the idea of Stooges, and then of course the characters got more refined. But despite all of that, it's like the dialogue that they had was actually really clever and really funny, because like the Marx Brothers are typically known for Groucho and a little bit for Chico, but like for
and Harpo.
Groucho, but I mean, like specifically in the dialogue department, that tends to be more of Groucho's claim to fame. But the Three Stooges should not be discounted because they had some genuinely really clever dialogue also.
But it's absurd at the end of the day, is what I'm getting at.
It is absurd.
It's stupid, you know. It's fun, stupid, clever humor, you know. Well, and not saying this movie's that.
It's about stupid. The original shorts about stupid characters, but it's done in a really smart, skillful way. Probably the best that kind of thing has ever been done. That's what I'm saying.
That aside, though, what I take away from the movie at the end is that things are allowed to be stupid, and if it makes you happy, fine. And you know, very much the decision she comes to at the end is what you're going to come to with this movie. You're either going to enjoy it and you're going to run away and live happily ever after with it, or you just are not even at the wedding. You know?
Or you're going to be saying, "Stop that, it's silly."
Exactly.
I think, okay, so here's something that I observed with the thing, because again, message wise, I'm all down for that. I don't think executed it well, but. So something that did strike me. So the guy's name, Howard F. Howard, is an amalgamation of all three Stooges into one person, presumably. but this character is, other than his obsession with the Stooges, he's not really all that distinct in and of himself.
Nah.
And
Yeah.
but then his name is a fusion of all three. All three Stooges are, regardless of if it's Curly as the third Stooge or Shemp, or if it's Joe Besser or Curly Joe, whoever you're talking about, you know, they, all three of them have very distinct personalities. They are a trinity for a reason, and you try to put them all into one person, and or rather, the name of your character implies that. You try to do that, and you end up with someone that is not really much of anything outside of his fandom, and he's not the only one, as we've established in this world. So again, it's like all it does is illuminate all the ways in which the Three Stooges did work, because they counterbalanced each other.
And this
in
dude's
all
just
the
kind
ways.
of a dumb slob, you know?
That's what I mean. All the ways in which this guy does not work, because he's just kind of nothing.
It's
And
effective at telling that. I mean, and unfortunately, that's more of a reality than a lot of people like to think with excessive fandom. I've known several people over the years that's basically what they became, where their whole life was this thing. And, you know, you could really apply like that overall thing of this movie to any fandom that's out there, because
And I
that
mean,
exists in all of them.
you could probably, you know, take like if you wanted, you probably could do like a darker version of this movie and make it explicitly about like some of the darker sides of obsession in general, and that you know, you give yourself completely to something that doesn't know that you exist, and you lose yourself if you even had all that much to begin with. You know, you could easily make a statement about that. And I mean, a lot of movies about obsession and fandom and, you know, things, and like stalkers and stuff, like I'm thinking of like the King of Comedy and stuff, they've touched on things like that, you know, where people, they lose themselves if they
they almost stop being like an what do you call it, like a separate person to their obsession or their fandom or whatever. They just live and breathe that thing until it's like that's all that's left, you know.
And if they'd have done that, then, which is not just, again, you could probably argue that they're trying to get there in some form or fashion. That's not necessarily their explicit goal. I think they are trying to be like a wacky 80s comedy that's building on nostalgia. But it's like you could easily take a lot of these same pieces and you could make a film like that, and it would hold together a little better.
For sure. If we want to get real abstract about it, we could pretend that this was all some type of crossing over event that took place in his mind after he was smothered to death under that mountain of fucking popcorn.
It could be.
It could.
Or maybe he was just so disappointed that he got coffee in reality that his mind created the popcorn and the reality he was living in.
Right, and then see, I got to rip us out of this amazing dream world here to point out that how the fuck would he even pop it with all the water in there that would have been presumably in there to make the coffee?
Well,
Doesn't make any sense, you know? But I love it.
With that being said, anybody else have anything else to say about the plot of the characters before we move on?
No.
Not really, although interesting little interjections. So I mentioned the 2012 Three Stooges. I looked it up. Also, I didn't even know this existed, but there's apparently a TV movie from the year 2000 called The Three Stooges, but it's a biography about the real Three Stooges themselves and them trying.
One they called Stooge 2K about them like surviving Y2K.
Well, apparently this, and it's on Sony Crackle to watch for free, so I'll have to see if I can check it out. But it's about
race
their
for the
real,
ads, bro.
I know, but it's about their real lives and their real attempts to be successful and stuff. And I bring it up because the real life Three Stooges, as great of comedians as they were, their lives, especially as they got older, were faced with a lot of tragedy.
Yeah,
Curly
did a mini doc on him.
Roy was an alcoholic, I think.
Carly had a stroke and had to leave the group before eventually having another stroke and dying. Shemp had a stroke, if I recall. Eventually, it was just they all wasted away, and then I think it was Mo was the last one standing. But which is not surprising because everybody smoked in those days. But it's just like there's a lot of tragedy to their story, which again, there's an example of you take these funny people and you can illuminate something else from that, and in that case, it's their real life story. But that's something else probably want to check out.
So with that, let's talk a couple other things. How about for the budget it had? What did y'all think of the effects on this film?
A lot of fucking popcorn, bro.
That was.
It had to have been at least.
That's
like
probably where half the budget
Top
went.
Secret or some shit.
Kind of goes back to that what I was thinking about with Forrest Gump or Pete's Dragon. It was kind of a amalgamation of what's real and what's not. It's all in the main character's brain. It kind of is like an interesting kind of foray what he really wants to see. So I thought it was kind of interesting. I'm not sure that it was never the effects would never win any kind of award or any kind of much way of recognition, but the idea was to bring in the other world into the real world, and they did it very effectively. Opened up a door, and they all saw whatever film it was. Yeah.
I mean,
over and over and over again until
to its credit,
real. It became real with that insane asylum. It became real. I was like, whoa, this thing actually it moved from being not real into becoming real.
Yeah, and I mean for the time, pretty ahead of its time in a lot of ways. To do something like that with, especially given the concept. I mean stuff. There was stuff doing that, but to try to do it on such a low budget, I gotta commend them for that. And like Roger said, I think they, all things considered, did it pretty effectively.
Yeah.
What about the music?
Oh, I don't know, dude. I was so overwhelmed with the bat shittery of this thing that I couldn't tell you too much about a lot of that. I feel like it had some rockin' 80s tunes throughout in there.
Very 80s.
I seem to remember it being
very 80s.
I seem to remember it being effective, but I don't really remember it.
I didn't. I did like the song in the opening credits and the one that's in the climax. Like, I like those songs. They do noticeably clash with the footage that you're mostly seeing. Just because the music is so unbelievably 80s and the footage that you're seeing is so unbelievably 30s and 40s that it's like there's a noticeable disconnect here.
True enough. That theme song was kind of a banger, though, now that it's like coming back into my brain a bit. I remember there's like a part where he's like, I'm not just an alien robot.
You know what's kind of funny?
Cool. Like, what the fuck?
You know what's kind of funny? One of the music composers behind this film was Hummy Man, and he did work on Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Huh.
And Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Dude, it seems like such an overly silly movie that it, regardless of whatever you think about like how it was made, it was probably a blast to be hanging around with the people when they were doing it.
Oh, I mean, it sounded like it looked a lot of fun.
Yeah, even if it's not good or whatever your end vote on it is, it in the very least looks like it was a fun little goofy time for probably a lot of inexperienced people and experienced people alike,
Well,
one thing I will agree with Dane on here, I think, if we're talking technical merits, the film definitely would not win, I don't think anyway, would not win awards on its editing.
No, it was. Well, that's one of my complaints with it is that the structure of the movie is very similar to what you might see if they were to show a bunch of Three Stooges shorts on cable. and they try to stitch it together with sketches or with a host, trying to guide you through them or whatever. And you just stuck those segments together, try to make that into a movie. Because what happens, you have a sketch or you have some weird nonsense with our main character for like a few seconds, and then it transitions into at least a minute or two, if not more, of the Three Stooges doing their thing. And it's like that. It was pretty much that through the whole movie. Some filmed segments were longer than others, but like that was more or less the structure, and it tended to follow that same way. So it's like, yeah, they're not really trying to go outside the box of like the basic format, the basic pace, and yeah, that it's very cut and paste.
Well, but in some of that, I think lies some of its charm for me personally. I also really like how the parts where he's like out and about a lot of times have that feeling like those fucking segments where Mr. Rogers would go outside of his house. It does have like this surreal fucking sort of midday TV in the 90s quality to it, or the late 80s,
Yeah. Oh, you were saying something, Roger?
I was disagreeing with Mosley, with Mo, because there was some strange parts, like we mentioned about the Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, how he would travel to another another dimension, and there was the romper room with the magical glass and all that kind of thing. It was really permeated the whole show. I rather found it interesting in that aspect.
Yeah, it's a fun aesthetic, like if you like that kind of stuff.
Again, AVGN voice popping in aesthetic.
I mean, I guess I don't know. There's a lot to be said about old school daytime TV. Just that quality of it that felt like a dream when you were watching it home from school. Maybe there was the home from school when you weren't supposed to be thing. Like I was like, I'm sick or some shit. Yeah, I'm watching like some crappy daytime TV and I'm loving it. I don't know who the fuck Sally Jesse Raphael is, but we're doing that later.
Yeah. So with that being said, why don't we get to favorite scenes? Why don't we start with Jake? What's your favorite scene?
Favorite scene? Well, favorite's such a strong word. But I think I did enjoy the popcorn scene, if only. Although I will admit, kind of like watching the Stooges scenes reminded me of the Stooges, and watching the scenes with the father reminded me of Monty Python, and watching the scenes with the popcorn reminded me of Real Genius. So it was like, I don't know, I guess the parts in the film that worked the best were mostly the ones that reminded me of something else I could be watching. But I will give credit to that opening sequence, because I admit those were some crazy ass kids, and that must have. I can't imagine who would run their theater in a way to let kids do that. That's just
crazy.
Bringing trouble down on yourself.
Yeah.
Well, how about you, Dave? What was? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jacob. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I will also say some of the parts of Stooge Row were pretty fun too. Yeah.
What about you, Dave?
I'm trying to think. I think the whole thing of where Howard had walked into that room with all that popcorn. That was that was a good scene, but anything with Sid Caesar.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I love the idea that he was like sucking on her neck like Dracula, and then when he came in and he was like, "Well, let me lay my problems on you," and he's like, "Okay," and then while he went into movie mode, he was like, "Well, we can go back to necking while he's doing that."
There's
Yeah.
such a good part too where he sits him down on the couch and he's like, "Are you comfortable?" And then he's like, "No, not really," or something like that. And he just has it look like, "I don't give a shit." And like it's a subtle little bit, and I don't know if that was just him giving up on the dialogue or.
What about you,
scripted, but-
Forrest?
Probably just for me, it's really just the opening when he talked about how he growing up a young cinephile.
All right, and Dane?
The opening, because that one was the most heartfelt section of the thing, and it also did kind of start to lull me in and think, well, maybe this will be like a really loving homage, and maybe this will or maybe this will tell like a heartwarming story about this kid who's a Stooge fan and this, that, and the other thing. And again, the theme song was good, and it just kind of took a hard right and into its own little world.
What about you, Mo?
Oh boy. I mean, of course, Triple Stooge is a highlight, as is his fucking uncomfortable moaning that he's doing. It reminded me of Maniac, actually. That moaning when he's like looking into that eyeglass. I almost kind of wonder if that might be a nod to that, because there's that part in Maniac at the very beginning where he's looking at those people on the beach through like one of those viewfinder things, and he's doing that creepy moaning. So I wonder about that. But those two scenes, of course, are highlights, as is the hooker that's talking to him, like trying to proposition him in Stooge speak. And I think he even says, "I know speak of the Stooge." It's just so many stupid fucking little things like that in this movie that I love. But overall, my favorite scene's got to be that first PSA where that dude just starts stooging out and he just goes full ECW on his whole family and then just starts breaking the house. I never thought domestic violence could ever be made momentarily funny, but that was fucking good shit, dude. He's like throwing that potted plant against the wall. I rewound it like at least twice.
What about you, Roger?
Well, I like the part when they were meeting the parents. I was half expecting the old man to just explode. That this guy's a fool. No, get rid of him. Then he kind of like suddenly says, "Great, love this guy. He's honest." I said,
he knows what he wants and he goes for it.
I said, "What?" And everybody's cool with the belly dancer, the dancing around, and weird food being brought out. It was that was the scene that really stuck in my brain.
I was all about the Stooge Row. It just came back to me from when I was a child watching it. Now, I will say, I also have admiration for the wedding scene at the Justice of the Peace, just because I like how they did that intermingling to where it was hard to tell one scene from the other, and that takes some skill, regardless of what one would say about the film. That still takes some skill to do and pull off as they did.
For sure. I mean, Stooge Row would definitely be my favorite overall section of the movie, for sure. And that scene, while it's not my favorite, definitely, I agree, is worth mentioning.
Well, I will hand this back to Dave to do the outros.
Alrighty. So, let's start with you, Forrest. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. Forrest, my name's Forrest Bennett. I'm based in Long Island, New York. Indie film producer. Also, currently acting in a short film, which will be coming out soon. And also avid movie and comic book enthusiast. And you can also catch me on a channel called Evil Greg, where I'm doing a dramatic table reading of George Miller's Justice League Mortal.
You were looking sexy as fuck, dude, in that suit for that shoot you were doing. Like you're about to do a goddamn like Twilight Zone episode on a bag of Frito chips right there. I loved it.
Heading over to you, Dane. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I am Dane Kyle, a filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm on a channel called Indie Horror Film Creative, where I have done a show called Blu-ray Views, but I have not posted in quite some time. But I have been outlining a several different month-long series that I'll probably end up doing on a whole different channel that are totally different from anything I've done before. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
Cool. Heading over to you, Mo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, my name is Mo. I was a little hurt you didn't put me in there first, man. I was the first stooge introduced in this movie. Remember?
That's true.
Basically, I just don't do a whole lot of anything the last couple of months. Been sitting around watching anime, reading old young reader novels, and just eating a lot of instant noodles. But I have a channel called Drunken Master Studios, which I'm going to be uploading again on here real soon. Got a lot of full moon content that I'm going to be doing. Recently won back the, publicness of my very first episode in my Full Moon Madness series from the Elvira people, because I guess she showed it on there, and they're like, you just can't put this anywhere for a while. But I appealed it to them, and they found it in their heart to just let me keep my first episode of the whole series. So I'm a lot more stoked to get back to doing it now that that's happened. Next review is going to be for Meridian, which is like some weird werewolf sex film. So we'll see you there.
Alrighty. Going over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm SeptumSin of SeptumSin versus the World. We love physical media, the collection, and everything else in regard. If you want news about what's coming out or like pickup videos, of course you can check out the channel. We also do reviews. I do some video game content. Matter of fact, I'm going through another collection video where I'm hitting all of my portable stuff, the PSP and the 3DS stuff. Of course, also we had a recent discussion about Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad, which was a really fun, in-depth review of that anime. With our next upcoming going to be hosted by Dave, where we cover the Unicom movies at the end of July. So it's going to be very fun. And we have an upcoming Spandex Heroes game that hopefully we'll be able to get in on, where we'll continue the murder mystery that we had started way back. And finally, I do work with Inside Movies Galore, trying to help keep things organized. And we have a lovely month coming up next month. We are going to be doing a John Candy-centric month. But most of y'all who have been fans of the channel has already heard about that. But what's also cool is, even though we are sadly going down to one film discussion a week, they're going to be quality ones, because our first week is going to be The Great Outdoors. Nice. The second week will be Spaceballs.
Cool.
Third week will be Canadian Bacon.
Yes.
And then fourth week is going to round it out with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
I know I
This
really
will be
like the way
fun.
he said Spaceballs, though.
So you got some fun stuff with John Candy coming up in that month. So we have a lot there, and I hope we see y'all with us. And of course, I would invite the rest of the team to, after the broadcast, to discuss something briefly for about 5 minutes after.
Alrighty. Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, my name is Roger. I live in Florida. I run an animation collection company. We're a specialist group that focuses on collecting. I've been watching anime for something like 25 or between about 25 or so years. I really enjoyed talking with you all, because I've never watched any of these movies other than maybe Castaway. So I am getting the appreciation that there's more to there outside other than I call AAA title movies or anime. So thank you
man.
for
I mean, there's
on.
Stoogemania. Need I say more?
That's definitely something that's new, that was completely new to me. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Well,
Jake.
let's not forget he's also the operator of the Super Grand Grid Array and herald to Haruhi. It's through him that we speak
enough.
to the goddess, you know.
True
Right.
enough.
So, Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. My name's Jake. I am a co-host on SeptumSin versus the World. And, movie fan, collector, what have you. Then and frequently come on this channel and Delusions of Grandeur to discuss these films with you fine folks. And been working a lot lately. Trying to get a new business going while still working 2 other businesses, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's good times, and and it was we had fun with Beck. I certainly enjoyed getting to finally finish that one. I look forward to the Unico stuff, and I really do look forward to some of these John Candy movies, too. Been wanting to do Spaceballs for a long time, so be good times.
Alrighty. And my name is David Streggy. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, where much of us find a Longfellow reading nerds tend to like to get on and discuss anything dealing with Edgar Allan Poe. Well, sort of, kind of, Cthulhu-wise, and other type films of that nature.
Isn't he also the Raven dude? Caca!
Nevermore. Anyways, but we definitely have a good time here discussing films of all natures and whatnot, so definitely catch us next week as we go into our John Candy rest of our month. But I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also discuss movies of a different nature. I also go on about my own reviews, and I do my own video pickups on the channel. So definitely go ahead and check that out. I know this week with my buddy Boris, we checked out the 2013 film This Is the End. And next week, we are going to be checking out the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie End of Days.
Nice.
So check that out.
Killer soundtrack album for that movie.
Yeah, I've got the Guns N' Roses track for that on my iTunes.
Oh,
It was a banger back in the day.
Indeed.
So, in any case, thank you for checking out our lovely discussion here. Hopefully you enjoyed the entertainment value of it. And,
Yeah, stooge responsibly, kids. You know, if used moderately, it can be a nice hobby and not a crippling addiction. Stay out of stooge.
Right.